This video supported in part by
It's just a VR YouTube channel.
Back in 1981, Atari continued their streak of releasing what would become iconic arcade games when they unleashed Centipede into the world. Over the years, it spawned numerous sequels, clones, and ports, but now, 40 years after its launch, Atari has amped up this fixed-screen shooter in the form of Centipede Recharged. What can you expect from this new release? How does it connect with its legendary granddaddy? And maybe most importantly, is it worth your time and money? I'll try to answer those questions and more in this review of Centipede Recharged right now.
Don't you know that you're a grown-up? No games, no puns. Not allowed if you're a grown-up.
Centipede Recharged is a brand new game, just released this week and heavily inspired by the 1981 classic. It's published by Atari and co-developed by SneakyBox and Atom Vision, who also developed Missile Command Recharge that came out just last year. But unlike that previous title that initially was a mobile game that later got ported to consoles and PC, Centipede Recharge has been simultaneously released on PlayStation 4 and 5, Xbox, Nintendo Switch, Steam for the PC, Epic Games, and the Atari VCS. The first thing that's going to jump out at you right away is this largely vectorized look, much like that Missile Command Recharge from last year. And in fact, if you look at developer Atom Vision's portfolio, you will see they have a real affinity for this neon Geometry Wars-esque art style, so seeing it here again should come as no surprise. The look is, of course, very different from the original Centipede, and I think that's okay. You're bringing something into the modern age and you're doing something a little bit different with it, and since the developer is so well versed in creating imagery in great games that look like this already, what we end up with is a game that has a lot of visual excitement going on. From the glowing look of the characters and mushrooms to the Tron-like grid that actually helps you line up your shots, it works well even though purists will say this doesn't look like Centipede. You're right, it's not. It's Centipede Recharged. Complementing that art style is a soundtrack that reminds me very much of the original thump 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 you would have heard in the old classic Centipede arcade game. That I can probably only best describe as easy listening techno, maybe? Well, at any rate, it definitely gets the feeling across of what's going on in the game. It has that frenetic thumping heartbeat that you'd want in a Centipede. All in all, the graphics and sound, though different than the original, really work well and complement the game that's being presented. The core game you're presented with here is very faithful to the rules of the original Centipede. Faithful, in fact, maybe to a fault. Look, you have mushrooms all over the screen. It takes 4 shots to kill a mushroom. You have centipedes coming down. If you shoot them mid-body, they split into multiple centipedes. If you shoot them in the head is destroyed and the entire centipede shortens. If the playfield is running low on mushrooms, fleas will fall from the top to create new mushrooms. You have scorpions that cross the screen periodically to poison mushrooms, and if a centipede hits one of those poison mushrooms, it goes on a rainbow acid trip and makes a beeline straight down to the player's area of the screen. And of course, bouncing around your area of the screen are those dreaded spiders, and they take a little bit of a different role in Centipede Recharge, and I'll get to that in a second. The biggest key difference to core gameplay here is that unlike Centipede, which is an arcade game with multiple lives and you can earn new lives, Centipede Recharged is a one-and-done affair. If you are killed, it is game over. There's no retries, there's no earning extra men. This is just a quest to get the high score with one man as best you can. And one quick pro tip that's true in the classic Centipede as well as Recharged, you may think that all these bugs are your biggest enemy, but they're not. Mushrooms at the bottom of the screen are actually the biggest threat to your success, so when you have an opportunity, clear those things out, because too many mushrooms down there is what makes the game frenetic and hard to keep track of. Control in Centipede Recharged is by far my biggest complaint with this title at launch. And it's not that the joystick control was implemented poorly. In fact, it does a good job of adaptive acceleration, and if you're moving a little bit, it speeds you up or slows you down. Control is actually fairly accurate. The problem I have with controls is that here I am on a PC with a mouse playing a game that was designed to use a trackball, and you cannot use a mouse to control the game. And yeah, that also means if you happen to own a trackball, tough luck. You cannot use it to play this game. And look, I kind of get that this game was designed for multiple platforms, and many of those platforms don't have access to a mouse or a trackball, but it was also a showcase for the Atari VCS. on which you can plug a USB trackball or mouse, and yet it was not included as an option in the game. And to further taunt you, you can use the mouse to navigate the menus in the game, but once you click start, the mouse is disabled. Centipede is one of the most well-known games that used a trackball. For many of us, it was our first exposure to a trackball, and it's not included on this reboot of Centipede. Look, I hope you're watching this video far in the future, and there has been a patch to include mouse control. How mouse and trackball support was not included at launch is an absolute miss. How did that get out of the planning stages? I don't know. But it's definitely an omission that hurts the playability of Centipede. Now, I had mentioned that spiders serve a little bit bigger role in Centipede Recharge than just being an adversary, so let's talk a little bit about that. Killing spiders, managing spiders, and what you do with what the spiders drop is really the biggest differentiator between the original Centipede and Centipede Recharged. Because when you kill that spider, he is going to drop a power-up that you can pick up and utilize. And there are a variety of different power-ups available. Most of them modify your weaponry. Typically, you can have just one shot on the screen at a time, but based on the power-up you could have burst shots that have lots of bullets that go out in an arc. You could have rapid fire, so you can shoot tons and tons of shots simultaneously. Side shot sends bullets directly out the side of you at a 90-degree angle, which would be really handy if you're swarmed by a bunch of centipedes, or even exploding bullets that detonate on impact. Those can be great screen clearers, or really handy if you're trying to get rid of a bunch of mushrooms that are in your way. And there are also some more creative power-ups, like laying bombs in the playfield that you can then shoot and detonate when there are enemies near them. One that puts the game in slow motion, so you have a little more time to think and plan about your next activity. Or one of my favorites, the Ghost. Grabbing this power-up will send all of the centipedes scurrying back to the top of the screen, getting them out of your way. And one thing that isn't immediately obvious and is kind of counterintuitive to most video game instincts is you don't just grab that power-up as soon as you see it. You see, not all of them will stack nicely. So for example, if I have burst fire enabled and I pick up a rapid fire pickup, my remaining burst fire is gone. So be careful what you pick up and when. Luckily, these power-ups can live on the screen for what seems like 30 or 45 seconds before they disappear, so you can leave the playfield littered with them and pick them up when you're ready. When you do grab a power-up, the duration of it is represented around the perimeter of the screen, and when that border drains, so too does the power-up's ability. And while I'm on the topic of these power-ups, I think it's really important here to call out that these power-ups are just for this game and they're just momentary. You may recall if you played Missile Command Recharge that it offered some overall progression in the form of permanent upgrades that you could earn, and those upgrades would actually assist you in getting better and better scores as you progressed. None of that is present here in Centipede Recharged, and I'm not sure why. I mean, gradual and incremental improvements to game elements like the duration of my power-ups or even extra life slots would have been a welcome addition. But this game doesn't do any of that. So as such, the core game here is identical every time you play in the search for larger and larger high scores. So that's great if you can get enjoyment out of just trying to climb the leaderboards. But if you're hoping for a little more progression, like the previous title in this series, you're not going to get it with Centipede Recharged. Fortunately, though, the core game is not the end of the story. There are two more modes that I want to highlight here that bring extra value to the game. The first of which is the challenges. Challenges are time-based levels that establish a certain layout on the screen and give you a particular task that you may or may not have ever tried to do in the core game. It might suggest that you kill X number of spiders as quickly as you can, or maybe detonate as many enemies with bombs, or even try to avoid destroying things. There's one particular challenge where you need to achieve a certain score without destroying any poison mushrooms, so you've got to be very careful how you shoot. For lack of a better comparison, I would call the challenges almost the story mode of Centipede Recharged. These are levels with specific goals that once you accomplish in the best time you can, it unlocks the next one and the next one. So you do have something to accomplish and achieve, even though there's no progression or leveling up in the core game. The last part of Centipede Recharge that I really want to highlight here is the couch co-op that's offered in the game. And it's exactly what you think it might be. It's the core game, but with two players on screen simultaneously cooperating to get the highest score that they can. This was, by far, the most fun I had with Centipede Recharge of any of the other modes. And I think it's because you can cooperate with another person, and unlike the single player, it's not one and done. Because co-op mode adds an additional power-up to the spider. If you have died and your partner can pick up the heart power-up, it will resurrect you and you can continue the fight. So several times in playing co-op, my partner would die, and now they're cheering me on to survive long enough to bring them back into the game. This added a lot more fun and nuance to the game for me, playing two-player co-op, than playing either the single-player or the challenges. It was frankly the best part of Centipede Recharged. So in the end, what are you getting for your money when you buy Centipede Recharged? Well, you're getting a modernized version of Centipede that you know and love, and most of the rules and mechanics of the game are still here. If you love and know Centipede, you can immediately pick up and start playing this sequel. But it's not without fault. There are a few missed opportunities here that I called out. The lack of any sort of progression or improvement of your player, that's something I'm missing that I really loved in the previous title, Missile Command Recharged. And the big one, not including mouse or trackball support, that one is just absolutely unforgivable, and I have to imagine, with the outcry that I'm already seeing on the internet, that the developers are going to hear that cry and add support for it on platforms where it would be available. With all of the data taken into consideration, then, I'm going to award Centipede Recharged 2 3/4 tokens out of 5. There is a fun Centipede game to be had here. The addition of the challenges, and especially that co-op, are really what put it over the top from a nah, maybe to a yeah, probably, if you are a fan of Centipede. Hey, I really hope you found something to enjoy in this video, and I will talk to you next time. Bye-bye. Hey, you made it to the end. If you liked this video, the best way to say thanks is to watch one more. Here are a couple suggestions that you just might enjoy. And if you love our content, maybe consider becoming a Patreon supporter by following the link on screen.
Unacceptable for grown-ups. Your dinner cannot just be french fries.